The Gungrave sweep is real! I cannot believe I finally have my hands on this game. It is a real game that exists. You can go to the store and spend money buying it. How did this happen? Who actually allowed this game to be made? Because other than people like me, who do they exactly plan to sell this to make a profit? I do not even know how to review or quantify a game like this. On one hand, part of me wants to look past all of its flaws and be happy that we got a game that is so unabashedly feeling like it came out in 2004. But on the other hand, this game is riddled with lack of polish, so woefully under budget, and feels like it is blatantly incomplete. It's so jank, but it has soul. It's shit, but I love it. It makes me want to snap the disc in half, but I can't stop playing it. I got pretty much exactly what I wanted from this game, so I walked away satisfied. I've been saying for months that I fully expected this game to come out and get bashed by general audiences and critics for what it is, and I can understand where they're coming from. For someone who is not a fan of the first game, I don't think there is much here for you. It's one of the many reasons I find trying to judge a game like this so hard, because while it's incredibly faithful, it's hard to justify the $50 price tag. It's unabashedly trying to replicate the magic of the first game to a fault, which will alienate the average player. This is what makes the game's existence such an oddity. Obviously, it's a game that is catered to me and my tastes, so I'm happy, but from an objective business standpoint, Gungrave G.O.R.E is the anti-focus test game. This game lacks everything you'd see put into a modern release to keep it in line with what average consumers' expectations are. Outside of arguably runtime and progression, it truly feels like a game that fell out of time, released with a somewhat modern coat of paint. This does not excuse the massive amount of jank and downright infuriating design though. The game is clearly low budget, made with Cheeto dust and a dream, which does make me want to go easy on it. It's from a small, practically unknown Korean developer whose only other releases are the Gungrave VR game from a few years ago and a World War II plain dogfighter battle royale that has 3 reviews on Steam. Even with its low budget nature, I find its lack of options like remappable control schemes and other basic features present in the first game that came out 20 years ago unacceptable. It honestly feels like we are regressing here, where new games come out with less options that should be basic features in a full release. The fact you can't remap the controls unless you're playing on a keyboard for the PC version while moving shoot from square to the right trigger is baffling. I joked about how Gungrave was a game where your wrists go to die in my review for the first game, but at least it had an auto option where you can just hold down the button and it wasn't on the most jagged-edged controller trigger on the market. I could not play this game in long bursts because it would leave me with serious wrist pain, which I was already suffering from recently. The only time you get to hold down the trigger is when you do the iconic gun katas, which requires you to mash RT 4 times to initiate. The game's Twitter account has joked about this and talked about a patch coming, so I fully expect at least the auto option to be added to the game. I predict a bunch of shit I'm going to say in this review to be changed to some degree with patches. This makes me incredibly frustrated since it feels like I am wasting my time and have to keep adding disclaimers to my videos because they inevitably become out of date. Hopefully some of the stuff I'm going to complain about gets changed because it seriously is holding this game back. Who could have predicted that after writing this and going to bed, I would wake up the next morning a few hours later and see that they announced the 1.0 patch that basically addressed everything I planned to complain about. While this is great for the game, this isn't the one I initially played, so I plan to leave what I wrote in, but I will clarify what actually got patched. You'll be able to tell what gameplay is pre and post patch in this video by seeing what costume I am playing with. All the post patch footage will be using the pre-order bonus costumes which didn't actually ship with the game, requiring me to email the publisher days later to get them, only when I found out from a Reddit post when looking up how to get my code from Best Buy. There is actually a decent amount of changes and new features present in this game compared to the previous two, and almost all of them are great and for the better. The camera is much better in Gungrave G.O.R.E as it is no longer tied to Grave's back and actually makes use of the right stick like a normal third-person shooter. You have a new move called Storm Barrage, which allows you to mash triangle to fire bullets all around you once you get 50 hits on your combo. This move looks so cool and I instantly fell in love with it and tried to use it whenever I can, but I came to the realization that unless the enemies are right on top of you, it's incredibly inaccurate, only really firing to your sides and in a V shape from where you are facing. The 50 beat requirement actually comes up a lot, which makes me wish it was just a regular move that you have access to at all times. There are so many situations where it would be really useful, but you can't make use of it since there is no way to keep your combo going as you make your way through the levels, or you are stun locked until your combo drops, or the level starts and you are already being assaulted by a million dudes. This has been slightly remedied after the patch where as long as you have your shield, you won't get staggered from enemies while doing this attack. Like I mentioned earlier, your gun katas have been moved to the new burst mode activated by pressing RT 4 times. I really wish that doing anything else didn't cancel this and instead just picked it back up if you were holding down RT, or pressed and held it again after doing a roll to dodge an incoming attack or striking back incoming missiles. It would drastically improve the fluidity of combat, which has a lot of stiff quirks to it that really brings the jankness of this game to the forefront. The auto function added in the first patch does somewhat do this by instantly activating burst mode while standing still if auto is turned on. I'm really glad that they made auto an option that you can toggle on the D-pad so it does not end up being like Gungrave Overdose where you lose access to your charge shot, since the only place you could change this auto option is in the main menu. In the third patch of the game, they added the ability to do your charge shot while jumping and while doing your roll. This patch also made it so your charge shot fires more, but the trade-off is that it takes longer to charge than the original version. I don't really like this change. The new shots feel like they have no impact, leaving you just standing there taking fire from enemies who are not reacting to being hit by you at all, and the new charge shot takes so much longer to fire that it just feels really awkward as is. I think a great fix for this would be to allow you to do the normal charge shot like you could do in the original version of this game, but also charge it longer to make it fire like it is now. This way it's the best of both worlds, but even if they don't change it, at least you can cancel out of the move now, so if it isn't doing anything for you, you aren't animation locked and stuck doing this super limp move. It also added a reticle so you can tell who the game is targeting, along with the ability to aim down sights, so you can overwrite the game's reticle and choose your own targets. The soft lock in this game is leagues better than the one found in Overdose, and even in moments where you find it doing weird stuff similar to that game, you can always just snap it back into the action by aiming down with LB. Your coffin has a bunch of new moves now. You have a 3-hit combo with different finishers depending on which face button you press as your third input. You now have the ability to grapple people with your coffin by shooting a chain out of it like Scorpion. This has a few options to it too. It can bring small enemies to you by tapping RB. It can bring you to them by holding RB. This happens no matter what if it's a large or specialty enemy, so be careful and try not to use it over large gaps or you'll end up like me. Enemies now have a dizzy state where you can finish them off, which increases your art score along with giving you some shield back. I want to make note that the finisher is called Rip, the Raging Immortal Punisher, which I think is just the coolest shit ever. If your enemies are dizzy at a distance, you can use your coffin's chain to either pull them to you for a fatality or do a lunging finisher. If the enemy isn't staggered, you'll take small ones as a human shield with 2 different finishers on triangle and circle. Trying to do these abilities in a crowd can be kind of annoying, but the game is overall pretty good at figuring out when you want to actually take someone as a human shield versus picking a dizzied enemy out of the background to execute. For some reason on release, only your neutral coffin spin can send missiles back, despite Overdose, the game that introduced this mechanic allowing you to use any melee attack to do this. This is what adds to that unfortunate clunky and jank feeling of the gameplay. The first patch did address this by now allowing you to use any melee attack to send missiles back, even if their active parry frames are way less compared to the neutral coffin spin, which makes them and their timing feel kind of awkward. to the flow of gameplay. There is a plethora of demolition shots in this game which can be bought from the new shop that is available between each level. Some of the demolition shots have been fixed and improved from Gungrave Overdose, which makes them more desirable to actually use, like this one which now locks onto enemies where in Overdose they just shot in a cone in front of you and could easily miss them. Some of the demolition shots have horrible hit feedback, like the minigun where enemies don't even react to it, so I ended up ignoring them. You now have a rage mode which increases your damage at the cost of a demolition shot charge. While I really like this new feature, for some reason the meter to gain more demolition shots does not fill while in this mode, so it often felt like the worst option because in the latter half of the game, which I plan to get more in depth in later, requires you to abuse the shit out of AoE and invincibility frames from demolition shots. Unfortunately, I didn't get to use all the demolition shots in my first playthrough, and that is because one of my biggest complaints with the game, perk bloat. I've made it very clear on my channel that I hate progression systems, but I'm willing to tolerate them when it actually gives you new moves to unlock, like demolition shots or the regular combat abilities. Where it completely loses me is stuff like the middle tab of the shop in this game, because it is all filler. The game would be better off without it just giving you all those abilities from the get-go. I know part of what I'm about to say is tied to the infamous skill issue, but the amount of points you get is simply not enough to get everything without mindless grinding of the shortest, most optimal levels. Sure, if I was getting all A or S ranks, which I wasn't when playing a less balanced version of this game that people playing it after this video will never experience, it realistically only would have made a small difference. You are pulled in too many directions because while you want to unlock new moves and demolition shots to modify your gameplay, you have an entire stat boost menu to raise things you really can't perceive the difference. There are also a bunch of moves tied behind certain tiers of some of these stat upgrades. Most of these stat upgrades should have been given to you either as natural progression as you made your way through the game, like health and demolition shots as it was in the original, or things should have been simply given to you at the start, like the range for your bullets. Why is this something that you need to buy? This progression system adds to the roller coaster difficulty of this game, where it initially feels like I am playing the original game again, and then boom, next level it feels like I'm playing something right out of Gungrave Overdose. This is kind of hard to analyze now with the balance patch and actually having upgrades. A fresh save won't play exactly like my first playthrough, so I can't really tell if this was just simply because I didn't know the game that well and this was a learning experience, and actually having knowledge going back now makes these levels much easier. Originally, I had a long written out section about how a bunch of the enemies I found are absolutely infuriating, and how they are the main reason the game ping-pongs between the feeling of the original and Overdose, some enemies even being directly brought over from Overdose. But the balance patch changed a lot of facets about them that does alleviate their irritation. So this next section is going to be morphed into what they were like versus what they are now. All of the changes across the board are for the better in my opinion. The enemy that pissed me off the most in the original version of this game was the Riot Shielder. You either had to break their shield with a melee combo, have them get hit with an explosive, or hit the shield with a charge shot. The game's environments and your charge shots have some really weird and bad hitboxes, so there were plenty of times where I was clearly hitting them, but the charge shot went right into an invisible wall and led me to taking a bunch of damage, and overall broke the smooth flow of combat. Your charge shots and melee combos can get interrupted by the tiniest of things. Pretty much every basic enemy can trip you up, and the slightest stagger makes you lose your charge. The patch did make it so your melee combos can't be interrupted, which is a godsend. The game does not make this clear at all, at least from what I saw, but some moves like the triangle finisher for your human shield breaks enemy riot shields, and the patch made it so the slam does damage in a 360-degree radius around you instead of just right in front of you, so it makes it actually even easier to break the shield. Demolition shots post-patch also now break the shields. The shields break in 2 melee attacks post-patch instead of 3 as it was in the original version. Your guns in rage mode now instantly melt the shield with 1 burst of bullets. In one patch, this enemy went from being the biggest cock blocker to fun to just being another one in the lineup. For the rest of the enemies I am about to mention, it's important to note going in that a major factor that made them so annoying was their aggression and the lack of breathing room they gave you. All of them have been nerfed, so now they reasonably attack you so you can actually move instead of having minigunners return from Overdose that melt your shields and never run out of ammo, so once you enter their line of sight they never stop shooting. There's also the gas grenaders that would somehow carry an entire warehouse worth of ammo that would fill the whole level with green fart miasma so you couldn't see where you're going and are constantly taking damage. There's also the rocket launcher enemies that didn't stop firing, so you would have to sit still while a conga line of no joke 20 missiles would fly at you that you would need to deflect back at them until they died, or else they would infinitely fire, and if any of them hit you, you would get stun locked on the ground until you died. Now the rocket launchers only fire fire a new rocket, or 4 in the case of the specialty enemy, once their previous one detonates. The amount of bullshit and particle effects thrown at you in the 1.0 version of this game is comical at points. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen a video I posted about some of the encounters in this game. At certain points in certain levels, the floodgates open and the game turns into a CPU killer Doom wad from 1997, where they throw as many enemies at you before the game starts to lag. You'll enter an area and suddenly 100 dudes spawn out of thin air or burst out of the walls. Some of these are absolutely absurd, but when you get into the rhythm of things, they are, to the game's credit, very fun to power fantasy your way through mowing all of these guys down. It's only when the game catches you off guard without the storm barrage or those nightmare scenarios of unrelenting attacks like I've talked about is where the game really starts to test your patience. The sniper enemies seem to have been made to fire less as they have a 2-second delay between shots. At least I think this is who the patch is referring to with laser shooting enemies. But they're extremely high damage, and the fact that even with distance upgrades they are often way too far out of your reach, they end up still being a real ballbuster, especially in levels with large open arenas and with a shit ton of enemies bum rushing you, so it's not like you could just ignore them to get to the snipers first. The last major change brought by the patch is the redesign of 2 levels. Apparently I was the only person on the planet who did not have an issue with the train level. I did run into a now patched out glitch by complete accident that made it so I didn't die when holding a human shield and hitting the tunnel's ceiling, but every post I've seen, both online in general discussion and in response to my posts about this game, talk about how shit this level is. So to mitigate its annoyance, they removed the landmines on the roof of the train, they removed the jumping hazards, and seem to have made the train's length overall shorter, so there is less ground you need to cover before you get to the insta-kill. The platforming in this game, the 3 times it shows up, is bad and awkward because of how stiff the characters and their jumps are. So to remedy this, in Quartz's level they just laid down a bunch of planks so she could walk right across it and you didn't have to deal with it at all. If only they made her actually fun to play. The worst of the platforming segments in this game they sadly did not seem to touch at all, and that is this bullshit in the cave in Vietnam. It feels like a level from a game that plays completely differently from how Grave moves, and the collision on these boxes just makes this an utter nightmare as you crash into invisible boundaries of these shipping containers and fall, requiring you to sit and wait around and do this all over again. Not to mention that there's also rocket launcher enemies that fire at you, which will push you off this and again make you have to wait for these shipping containers to move back into place again. You can't even safely walk from one end of the shipping container to the other without it trying to push you off with an invisible wall. Since writing this segment, they seem to have also made 2 other minor adjustments to 2 other levels. The first one is level 6, where you are no longer on a timer to get to Mika before her team is overrun and everybody is killed. The second one is in mission 27. In the original version of this game, there were multiple laser grids you had to sneak past in order to get to the boss of the level. If you touched any of these lasers, it would instantly kill you. The first patch made it so they no longer did that, but it seems since then one of the other 2 patches has completely removed them entirely. There are possibly even more minor changes to levels, but these are the only 2 that I've noticed. Now I want to talk about some things that realistically can't be patched out of this game. No matter how many times I come back and add things to the script, they keep adding stuff to this game. As of the second patch of this game, which when I originally wrote this was the latest patch, they added a new cel-shaded mode to the game, and honestly it does not negate what I'm about to say about this after we cut back into the original script. It looks like they took all of the game's textures and put a Photoshop filter over it. They slapped this shit into Premiere and put the posterize effect on it. I don't even know if you can really consider this cel-shaded. I get that they're trying to make it look closer to the original game, but as is, it just looks like a deep fried shitpost. It doesn't make the game look any better. It often makes it look worse in a lot of places. All of these assets were clearly not made with this in mind, and while it may look better in some places, and it is cool that they added this in general, it realistically doesn't help this game's visual issues more than just being a band-aid that's covered in salt. The art direction of Gungrave G.O.R.E leaves a lot to be desired. I feel bad saying this, but compared to the original, it's very bland. It feels like Nintendo hired this man tier Unreal Engine store-bought assets, especially some of the monsters. All of them feel like they were ripped from something else. They remind me of some shit in a game Mandalore would cover that was an early access open world survival crafting game that would eventually die before ever being completed and was probably a scam. I would not say Gungrave G.O.R.E looks bad, but it does look really generic generic and forgettable. Just generic looking factories, neon city streets, jungles, and caves. Even the final level alien section that is a complete departure from the aesthetics of the rest of the game falls pretty flat. The only thing of note about this area is these floor textures remind me of the ones used for the Pack-a-Punch guns in Call of Duty Zombies. Sadly, nothing has yet topped the original's complete departure and tone shift in the final level. The only aesthetically pleasing thing for me in this game is the HUD. I love this big goofy skull. I am so happy they did not go with some shitty minimalist HUD like so many games do now. This shit right here is soulless, and if Gungrave G.O.R.E has anything, it certainly has soul. The overall presentation of this game isn't all that stellar. Most of the cutscenes look like some Unreal Engine 3 machinimas made in 2013 by Kutra. The depth of field was flickering in a bunch in my playthrough and often struggled to wrap around characters, especially their hair. The lighting was often incredibly unflattering to Grave, especially in level intros. The pre-rendered cutscenes look incredible, but they're sadly few and far between. The game is riddled with sound issues. It often felt like I was missing half of the sounds the game should have been playing at any given time. Grave's guns have a nice impact to them from the first game, but plenty of other things are either weirdly limp, super quiet, or have no sound at all. For example, your triple circle melee combo finisher has basically no sound. Same goes for your coffin chain grab. Your coffin finisher. Enemy weapons sound like pea shooters or make no sound at all like the shotgunners. Or the chainsaws that make no sound when they stab into you when they do their grab move. It often sounds like all of the weapons share the same handful of shitty sound library effects, even when it wouldn't make sense, so the foam Nerf bat swords make the same sound as the pistols or the shotguns. I played the PS5 version of this game, so sound effects played through the controller's speakers, which is cute and does enhance the experience to some extent, but the sound often didn't play or randomly did when it shouldn't have. I can't imagine what playing this game sounds like on a PC or Xbox. The already lacking soundscape must be even worse and weirdly barren compared to what I experienced. Like sometimes the sound cues for parrying rockets wouldn't play through my speaker, and it felt super limp, so it must be even worse if they don't compensate for this in the other versions. If you don't like this setting, there is sadly no way to turn it off from what I saw within the game. Maybe there's something in the system side of things on the PlayStation 5, but the game does not give you an option other than to turn off the radio, which I did because I am not making the same mistake I did in Overdose after having a single level of quartz squawking in my ears every 2 seconds over this shitty speaker. This sadly does not stop her from doing this every time you die though. Because of all of the sound issues, it makes the game feel incomplete, especially cutscenes. You can pick any action-based cutscene out of a hat, and there is a good chance there is going to be something slightly off about it. Usually explosions are weirdly quiet or completely absent. The worst being the final one where you and Zell deal the final blow to the big bad of the game. The transformation sound effects of the coffin feel weirdly out of place. Personally, I would have made it sound different, something more aggressive and loud, like Bay Transformer sound effects. The charging of their shots is non-existent despite there being visual indications that there probably should be. The sound of them firing was so muffled and quiet that on my TV I couldn't hear them and thought there was no sound effect until I watched it back on my PC. The shots hitting who knows who, yes, that is his name, and their corresponding explosions actually have no sound effect. effect. Zell's jacket ruffling is probably the loudest thing in this cutscene, and that should not be the case. The music is also something that is way quieter than it should be. The music selection is honestly pretty bizarre as well. The game has a bunch of great tracks, and then there's also a ton of levels filled with music that you would expect as a Guilty Gear lobby track, or main menu music in another game. Maybe it's unreasonable to say, but I do think shuffling the music around would do this game a big favor, so tons of levels wouldn't feel like it's filled with things you'd expect on a lo-fi to kill bad guys to playlist. I don't want them to make new stuff, just replace levels filled with the music I played in the example a minute ago. Before moving on to talking about the end of the game, there are a few things I want to talk about that I don't know how to flow into naturally. Like with Gungrave Overdose, Grave isn't the only playable character in this game, but unlike Rocket Billy and Junji, these characters are limited to specific levels. Quartz, the new character that I mentioned, talks to you over the radio. Her combat is focused around melee attacks, with her ranged weapon freezing enemies in place so you can hit them. Thankfully, you only have to play a single level as her, because I find her gameplay painfully boring. Her combat is so stiff and repetitive. The fact you can't turn off sound effects coming through the controller speaker leaves such a grating sound effect constantly playing anytime you are fighting. This sound is nails on a chalkboard for me. Bunji is the other playable character, and he plays leagues better than Quartz. Again, this was another section that had some pretty fair complaints about his gameplay, like wishing he had more tools to mess around with, and only being able to play him in his dedicated single level and a set piece in the final level. In the third patch that came out on January 27th, it addressed all of my issues, so I'm back again to rewriting this script. As annoying as that is for me, I really want to commend Iggy Mob because their patches have been dead on addressing issues people have with the game and making it a vastly better product. As much as I wish the game came out like this, it's very cool to see the devs continue to support this game and take it in the right direction. It only makes the game easier to recommend and all the more lovable. The new features added in the Bunji update include a charge shot, a dodge shot, a jump shot, a new backdash animation, a new demolition shot, and some other upgrades. Unfortunately, they aren't moves, but instead the same filler crap I've already complained about with Grave, like the range and damage increase. You already have to pay 30k points to unlock him in the first place, which I think is not only way too high, but dumb to begin with. Just make it a reward for completing your first playthrough, because now not only do you have to grind 1,000,000 points for Grave, but also another 1,000,000 for Bunji. If you are someone like me who planned to play him while trying to beat the game on G.O.R.E difficulty to unlock Brandon Heat, then you just have an underpowered character compared to Grave in an unforgiving difficulty. I already got a taste of what that was going to be like on hard, where I had to play him at the set piece at the end of the game, and I was stuck there for 30 minutes as I could not deal any damage to these ogre men, and just had to spam demolition shots over and over again so I wouldn't die. Even in the original version of this game, he was still incredibly fun to play within his single level with his basic options. He's much more nimble than Grave, as he has a unique dash mechanic when going into burst mode. It's unfortunate that I can't completely praise him with no caveats thanks to the intrusive progression. Despite overall liking this game, the last bit of it is easily my least favorite part, because it feels less like the original game like the early levels did, and more so like Gungrave Overdose. A bunch of these final combat arenas throw the most annoying, tanky enemies at you with such ridiculous numbers that you are pretty much required to abuse the iframes of demolition shots in order to survive and regain HP. In conjunction with the hordes of foes, they pepper the sniper enemies in areas that it's hard to reach them even with the level 4 distance upgrade. Again, like with Overdose, it really stretched the runtime longer than it needed to be for how simple the gameplay loop is. There are probably a handful of levels you could just outright remove and it wouldn't make that much of a difference because they are already bleeding together in my mind due to how samey and generic they are, or alternatively, you could cut down a bunch of levels in half because so much of it is just the same hallways over and over again. Bosses have never been this series' strong suit, but the ones present in the final few levels prevent me from wanting to go back and playing this game on G.O.R.E difficulty, where if I die, I restart the level. They play like shitty Dark Souls bosses with massive AoE attacks I need to dodge. Designed for a game with a better dodge roll, your roll does not have enough iframes and is so stiff while their attacks track you and have the most disjointed, unclear hitboxes that sometimes you dodge and it looks like you should be fine only to be hit anyways, and then other times I manage to dodge perfectly and I have no clue why when it looked visually no different from when I got hit. Even after the patches that attempted to address them, they are all still super inconsistent. Like I mentioned earlier, it's hard for me to compare how some of the balance stacks up post-patch because there were just too many variables and no access to the original version. For good measure, I did stream replaying the whole game on hard post the third patch, and basically brute forced my way through all the fights that got on my nerves. So I can't really say if I got better, the upgrades made that much of a difference, or did the patches actually tone them down. Taranti still can one-shot you faster than you can react. All of the main villain bosses still can catch you off guard with absurd damage out of nowhere, so I still don't really want to go back and do a third full playthrough on G.O.R.E difficulty. The one thing that I can say for sure is that the coffin you get for beating the game on normal that makes it so you stack demolition shots faster definitely makes abusing iframes even easier. I hope they don't end up nerfing this or patching it out. A few of the other bosses are just guys from the first game, but they are completely different. The only thing this guy and Bear Walkins have in common is their name. To end this video off, I want to list some of the things that I think this game could still use in a fourth patch. The devs have been good so far addressing criticisms of this game, and if they by chance see this, I hope that some of this makes it into the game, or at very least puts them in the right direction to changing aspects of it. The biggest change that would be in this game's favor is either adding more points as mission complete rewards or lowering the cost of upgrades in the store, possibly even doing both. After doing 2 full playthroughs and grinding one of the shortest levels at least 10 plus times, I still don't have everything unlocked for Grave. I don't even know how long it would take to get everything, and now it's going to take even longer because Bungie has the same upgrades of his own now. Not to mention that you already have to pay $30k to even unlock him, which I think should have just been a post-game unlock. Ideally, the whole stat upgrade menu that is in the middle of the store would just be removed from the game and just given to you from the get-go, but I know that is an unreasonable demand. It would vastly help the appeal of replaying this game if you unlocked things from lower difficulties when beating higher ones. For example, if I beat this game on hard first, please give me the original game's costume, which is this difficulty's reward, along with the powered up coffin and the guns for beating it on normal and easy. As much as I like this game, I don't really want to go back and play another 31 mission playthrough on easy after beating it on normal and hard, just so I can get the powered up guns. The game is honestly already wearing out its welcome by the end, a few too many levels for its own good. I do not want to have to play 124 missions to get all the cool things you added to this game as unlocks. The next biggest fix is everything related to the sound of this game. This is the thing that almost all players are going to interact with and experience when playing it. It really does take you out of the moment in cutscenes when the sound and the mixing is so off. That's not even mentioning when it happens in gameplay. Either add more sound effects to the game if they are missing, or fix the bugs that are preventing them from playing if they are actually in the game, and I just ended up having a bugged experience. Please also add a setting to stop sounds coming from the controller's speaker. I may like it, but if a player doesn't, they are just stuck with it. Please add fully remappable controls. I hate to come off like a dick, but this really should just be a basic feature in every game. Games should not be allowed to be released and charge money for themselves without this bare minimum function. Beyond being for someone like myself who just wants to move fire from RT to square, it is something that greatly helps players with disabilities. Please adjust the beat score ratings and post-mission screens. Getting an S rating feels impossible, especially when I get a 1200 plus combo score only to manage to barely crack A. Maybe make it so demo shots add to your beat counter instead of just keeping the combo going. It's the only real way I could think of helping you reach such high numbers without just spamming the roll storm barrage attack over and over again like I did in my second playthrough. Please also increase the beat combo time. As is, it quickly drops even when locked in basic animations, and so many levels have fake hallways and rooms with dead ends with nothing to break but have enemies you have to kill in them, along with it not being very clear what is actually breakable in most levels, and what is breakable isn't even consistent between them. For example, I cannot break this yellow generator in the cave level of Vietnam, yet it explodes in a single burst a few levels later. So many levels have narrow hallways and doors that you have to stand in in front of waiting for them to open that there isn't enough stuff in the environment to keep it going. The alien levels have barely anything or nothing at all in some cases to keep your combo going, so I have zero clue how you were supposed to get an S in these. I'm not sure if this is how it always worked, was changed to be this way in a patch, or is simply a bug, but please make it so if you do a demolition shot in rage mode, it doesn't instantly turn it off. If you want to keep it this way, maybe make it so the demolition shot does more damage or has extra visual flair when enraged. Please give the ability to change demolition shots mid-mission, either by cycling through each of the 4 D-pad directions, put them on a weapon wheel that when open either slows or pauses the game, or simply in the pause menu like it was in the original. There are so many demolition shots in this game that being limited to 4 feels really restrictive and just results in some of the less straightforward applications ending up being ignored. Unless you memorize every single level and every encounter that they have within them, you may run into situations where demolition shots you didn't take have better applications and uses than the ones you have now, but there's no way to swap them unless you restart the level, which the trade-off of losing all of your progress doesn't outweigh trying to do cool things within the levels. The game has so many cool demolition shots, but it feels like it does not give you the opportunity to use them to the fullest. This is easily the most negligible on the list, but possibly rework the new camera angles added to the Executioner's blood demolition shot. Besides the fact I find that it often obscures what you are doing compared to how it used to be, it often freaks out when you are too close to enemies and things in the environment. Possibly give us the ability to toggle the extra cinematic angles for each demolition shot individually, because I wouldn't want to turn them off wholesale just for this, because a lot of the other ones added in the patches, like the 360-degree camera on the Raging Inferno, look great. And that's everything I can think of. I'll leave this list as a TLDR on the screen now. Even when it was only the original release version of this game, I still planned to recommend it. And as I've said multiple times throughout this video, the patches have only made it a better and more worthwhile experience. This game may be jank and lopsided in areas, but I am really happy it exists and that I was able to play it. If you really like the first game, definitely check this out. It's leagues better than Overdose. It's available on Game Pass, so give it a whirl if you have a sub. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. If you really liked the video, please leave a like and comment, and don't forget to subscribe and pass the video around. If you really want to help support the channel, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. All patrons get access to videos a day early, along with a $7 tier that allows you to view rough cuts of upcoming videos. I'm now going to shout out all of my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Bully, Densha, Lucy the Fox, Salt and Sweet Rum, Sir Newt Newt, Scary Dinosaur, Curtis Harris, Elliot Morton, Francisco Bartles, Jeff Ladd, Kohai Carmen, Lotto, Medi Not the Bad Guy, Nathan Redding, Nemphy, Quanner, Quartz, Quench the Void, Samuel Egan, Sayin Heggy, Simply Aiden, Slemp Tingle, Swimming, Walkman, Akita Fishkiyama, BBF in Bloxburg, NM, Revin, Cosmonaut Cola, Rovit, Ben Johnson, Buckets, Bergnut, Chichometrius, Cursed Void RTGC, Ekfrazo, Filthy Fingers 69, Fishkami, Hardleg Joe, Kazmark Chick, Kevin Velasquez, Lazy Titan, Megan, Nicholas Pedinato, Rabies, Starcasters, Some Panda, The Worstest Guy, William Moore, and David Roberts. Thanks so much, guys. As for what's coming out next, I'm not really sure. I have a ton of videos still in the middle of production, things of varying degree of completion. I'm also slowly chipping away at Armored Core, but who knows whenever that's going to be out because there's 15 games I have to cover, I think. So if you really want to help support me, as videos take really long to make, I haven't uploaded in like 2 months since I'm working on a bunch of stuff that just isn't out yet, then the Patreon really helps out. I also have a NordVPN affiliate link in the description below using my promo code, and I also have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Any purchases you make while checking out using that link will give me a small kickback, and I think that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.